Hello, A Taste of AZ listeners. We are here in Old Town Scottsdale today, one of the new outposts of our guest. And our guest, can you go ahead and introduce yourselves and what business we are with?
Okay, I'm Jason McCluskey. We're here at Arizona Stronghold Vineyards. I'm the winemaker here, and with me is...
I'm Terry Glomsky. I'm the owner and general manager.
And how old is Arizona Stronghold?
Stronghold started in 2008, so it's been a while.
And that's kind of a long time in the Arizona wine scene, right? I mean, I know there's people probably around longer than that, but it seems like it's really developed in the past few more recent years. Is that correct?
Yeah, I'd agree with that. I would say I'm kind of an analytical type of guy.
Sure.
And I'm always referencing math. And the way I think about it is the growth was like this for 50 years. And in the past, let's say 10 years, it's been what they call exponential. It's been going through the roof, both in vines planted, but more so in the number of wineries in Arizona. It's gone up a lot.
Well, with my somewhat limited understanding of the wine industry, a lot of people source their grapes. That's not the case for you guys, at least in some capacity, right?
That's correct. We're what is called vertically integrated. And by that, I just mean that we're both farmers, we have vineyards, and we're winemakers, and of course, we sell the stuff.
Sure, yeah. Well, in this beautiful picture behind you guys is your winery, and it is massive. Just looking at it, you can see, it's one of those things where it almost makes you feel like you're in the farm country just looking at it because of the sweeping nature of the vineyards. Did this take a very, very long time to build up, or was this kind of your plan from the very beginning to operate at this scale?
The history of Arizona Stronghold and the other family wineries that we own would take forever. But with respect to that vineyard, we bought that vineyard way back in the beginning from someone that was exiting the business. By the way, a lot of times vineyards change hands because it's a generational issue. The original farmer just wants to retire.
Sure.
Farming's a tough business, physically, mentally, financially. And so we bought it back then in an auction, actually. And it was a real interesting process because I showed up and another buyer for the vineyard showed up for the property. And about 20 farmers showed up for all the equipment.
Oh, okay.
And so there was a lot more demand for the equipment than the vineyards.
Sure.
And that again gets us back to how the whole industry has developed. Back then, there just weren't a lot of let's call them the vertically integrated wineries that had both the property, the vines, and the winery operation. Most of them prior to that, there were exceptions, were farmers who were selling grapes.
Sure.
So that's why there weren't a lot of people there for that.
Well, and back then, too, Arizona wine isn't as widely respected and appreciated and awarded as it is now, right? We've got the Verde Valley as the new AVA. I believe, is Sonoyta an AVA as well?
Yes.
And that's something that a lot of people, I think, don't understand. And then you get into the complexities of, like you're talking about, the vertical integration of not only owning a farm, but then producing the wine and then having retail operations on top of that. It's extremely complex. And when you look at something like beer, which is more of my background, brewers aren't typically growing the barley and then malting it and then growing the hops and doing it in that type of vertical integration, which I think is something that is very unique about the wine industry. Is it's not only obviously very agricultural as beer is, but that vertical integration seems like it would create very unique opportunities for winemaking.
Yes. Oh, by the way, there's a third AVA, which is Wilcox in the state.
That's right. Yes.
Wanted to point that out.
And that's where you guys are based out of.
That's where this vineyard is.
Correct.
We do source from the other vineyards in Wilcox, and we also source from the Verde Valley. We actually own, related family members own some of the vineyards up there as well. So there's a lot of activity going on.
Well, and I think that's something that is kind of, I don't know if I would say it's difficult for people to wrap their head around because it's kind of simple, but also just the connections. And it's not really like many other industries, right? Where sometimes breweries will borrow malt from another brewery, but it's not like each of them has their own hand in the creation of that malt, like I was saying. Whereas with wineries, if you have connections with those different farmers and know the type of stuff that they're growing.
Yeah, I want to pass over the mic to Jason in a moment to talk about terroir.
Sure.
That's a term that I think everybody, even people that aren't that familiar with the wine industry, understand, and it's recognition about what you were just saying, which is it's kind of unique to the wine industry. The grapes, the vines, the place where they're grown, how they're managed is so important to the end product. Winemakers always like to say that it's them. The vineyard managers like to say it's them. I like to say it's me because it's not going to happen otherwise. Sure. But unlike a lot of other industries, it really is true that the grapes matter. Jason is a great winemaker. Jason can take, let's just say, okay grapes and make good wine from it. But even he, I think, would admit that he can't make great wines from just okay grapes. You need good grapes to make great wine. And if you have fantastic grapes, you're going to be very embarrassed as a winemaker if you don't make great wine.
Yeah.
Well, and so with that said, let's pass it over to you and discuss kind of not only Arizona's terroir in general, but maybe how it's unique from other growing areas.
Yeah, well, there are obviously several things that make it unique. And, the first thing I think a lot of people who aren't familiar with the Arizona wine industry, what they immediately jump to is, it's hot. That's you can grow grapes there. Everybody thinks we're growing grapes for wine in Phoenix, and they grow grapes here. I remember as a kid, I'm from Phoenix. We'd go grape picking, table grapes and stuff like that. The challenges here and the things that make it unique and interesting are things like the monsoons. So, water. You wouldn't really think that water is going to be something that creates a big challenge for grape growing in Arizona if you're not familiar with the area like we are.
Is that just a matter of like overwatering and maybe rot?
Yeah, it's just when the humidity and there's a couple different things that can happen with monsoons. It comes down to disease pressure. It increases the disease pressure a couple different ways. It increases that humidity, which is the first part of the growing season. We don't really have to worry about that, which is really nice.
And the amount of destruction that I saw just on my 15-minute drive coming over here.
Yeah, and there's hail that can come from it as well, of course.
A lot of it is the timing of when the water appears.
Yeah,
sure. I think we'd rather have the monsoons in the winter as grape farmers, but we need water.
Yeah,
so.
yeah.
And it actually does there are some positive aspects to it as well. It doesn't just bring challenges. It does drop the temperature significantly. If you get above around 95 degrees, the grapevines tend to just kind of shut down and you don't get any more ripening. So they're not just, even though they do definitely create challenges with all that moisture and even just all that water coming at once, if the grapes, it's happening right when they're getting ripe and pretty close to when we're going to pick them. And that can even burst open the berries sometimes, because the skins are a bit softer then at that point. But the other thing we have to deal with a lot is the cold. Not so much, very cold winters, but although it does get pretty cold down in Wilcox, for example, but it's the late spring frosts that'll come. So, if you have a nice warm winter, the plants might start waking up sooner, but you get a frost that comes through, it can wipe out all that fresh green material.
Sure.
And create serious problems. That's kind of happened in the Arizona wine industry the past couple of years. We've definitely seen a couple late spring frosts that have, our vineyard's been fine. We're usually not quite as susceptible to those late spring frosts due to our location. We're a bit more north and a little higher elevation compared to a lot of the other vineyards in the area. But yeah, the rain and the cold are two of the things that make it really unique. Just not even going into the soils. And
just to give a little bit more background on the severity of some of these things, there are a couple of vineyards up in the Verde Valley this year that had more than 50% of their crop wiped out by these late frosts.
It's not even a matter of quality. It's just a matter
They're
of
gone. They don't even develop.
Mm-hmm.
When we say wiped out, generally speaking, it's the buds, the flowers that are destroyed even before the grapes start growing because it's early in the spring.
Mm-hmm.
And grapevines generally only bud once per year. The vines are okay. You just don't have a crop that year.
Yeah, which as a vertically integrated business, it not only affects that part of it, but then it affects all your other operations that are stacked on top of it. That in a good year, I'm sure you're stoked about it, but in a bad year like that, it seems like it would compound the effect of something that's essentially entirely out of your control.
Mm-hmm. That's right.
Yeah, there are a couple things you can do, but they all depend on other factors. You can have frost fans, but the frost fans only work if there's warmer air sitting above that cold air that kind of cools down. And a few of these late spring frosts that we've had recently, there's pretty much nothing you can do. So some people try and even though it's I think there was still a fire ban at the time, but I did hear that some people were trying to burn barrels and what have you.
Create a little bit of warm air.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. But I'm not sure.
I mean, what are you going to do in that
efficacy
case?
Of that, but yeah.
Well, so you mentioned very briefly about the soil and other components that affect terroir and not just, the yield, I guess you could say, if that's a proper way of describing it. Talk a little bit about the other things that affect the quality and the uniqueness of Arizona grapes.
Yeah, so I mean, as with any region, there's a unique geological history here that influences everything that, it's not just the weather. It's like you're saying, it's the soil. So, vast parts of Arizona were underneath a large inland sea for a long time, millions and millions of years ago. Mm-hmm. And everything in Arizona is shaped by water, either water or fire. Interestingly enough, you have a lot of volcanic activity. There's a vineyard that we occasionally source fruit from, for example, which is a great example of this, but House Mountain Vineyard. Mm-hmm. That is, planted right on an extinct shield volcano, right on the side of it. And I'm not completely familiar with the soils there, whether they're all basalt or, whether the river there is, eroded it down to more of the sedimentary type of soils. But anyway, Arizona has a really wide variety of soil types, and even in the Wilcox area, the soils are vastly different from vineyard to vineyard. So as I said, we're kind of a little bit more north. We're kind of not really at the base of Mount Graham. That's not the correct way to put it, but the way that the land slopes there, it's kind of all sloping towards this wash. So almost all of our soil is certainly coming from Mount Graham eroding there. So we've got these really unique soils in our vineyard, and then you go half an hour, 45 minutes down south to Carlson Creek Vineyards, or we source a lot of fruit from them, or Keeling Schaefer, Golden Rule. There'll be slightly different soil types down there.
Sure.
And then of course you get up into the Verde Valley AVA, and the soil types can be vastly different depending on where they're planted, what level they're planted, and it's all really, really fascinating stuff.
The amount of technical knowledge that goes into winemaking because of the agricultural component and the vertical integration that not every business does, but considering Arizona can grow grapes, you see a lot of it here. It blows my mind. It's hard for me to even wrap my head around because, I know how to shoot some photos and things like that, but to know how to have a business revolve around agriculture, which is such a lottery in a sense, right? Because you don't know if you're going to get an early frost or if you're going to get a wicked monsoon. It blows my mind. So with that said, I'd like to get a little bit into your guys' kind of involvement in wine. How did both of you get involved in wine originally?
One comment before I
Sure.
answer that. You couldn't have more different businesses than farming and winemaking.
Okay.
Totally different skill sets. but that's what makes it tough. But that's what you need to be really successful.
Sure.
So I just wanted to say that, farming is very different than winemaking. And there are very few people that are good at both.
And then running a retail location as well.
Oh, yeah.
Totally different skill set.
That's called managing people. And
sure.
These days, that's very challenging. But to just get back to your question, the genesis of the family wineries in this state, my family, started in 2003. By the way, I have not been involved directly until about a year and a half ago with the business. And by that, I mean I was behind the scenes because I had a day job. I'm an economist by training. And the reason I bring that up is that when you think about what you need to do anything in terms of a business, you need labor, you need land, and you need capital. I was the capital guy. So my background, I ran a private equity fund. So as different as you could imagine from this business, but it did supply something that was useful, the capital part. So I was always behind the scenes when we started a sister company up in the Verde Valley in 2003. And my son runs that. It's called Page Spring Cellars. So that's how I was involved. I was in the background. He was the guy. Board member and all of that, owner with the family, but not really directly involved. I retired from my day job at the end of 2019 with the intent of moving to Arizona and having an advisory role in Arizona Stronghold. And lo and behold, it was the beginning of COVID, and lots of things happened, and I think a lot of people had these, I wouldn't call them life crises, but a reevaluation of what they were doing with their lives. And we had a bit of turnover in management, and some very important people that had been with us for a long time decided to go do something different, very different. So suddenly, here I was, the general manager, or let's just call it the acting general manager. And I got involved very quickly a year and a half ago, and I've been doing it since. So let's just drop the pretense of acting. I'm the general manager. And so that's kind of what I've done. I've always been involved. I have certifications in wine and all of that, but I've actually only been managing the company for a year and a half, and it's been exciting. I was the one that was responsible for the place we're in right now, getting it up and running. Learned a lot of things very quickly, made a lot of mistakes, but overall, it's working out, and I couldn't enjoy it more than it's the best job I've ever had. I never look back at my old occupation. Never.
Really?
Yeah. It's such a learning experience, and I get to work with great people, really, really good people, and that makes it so much better.
To call it a singular job is, kind of doesn't really capture all of the different things that you do, which I suspect may be part of the reason you like it so much, is it's always something different, I feel like.
Yes, there's never a dull moment.
So I would love to know some of the stories that are on the more exciting side of things, but we'll probably get into them at some point. But that's interesting because, private equity, obviously a business, this a business as well, but it's not two businesses that you would assume that there is a ton of crossover between them in terms of skill set, maybe outside of managing people and kind of that sales type of mentality a little bit, or capital focused mentality. Is there a lot of crossover that you found, or you said it's a major learning experience too?
Well, you hit upon the similarities. Every business requires strategic thinking. Every business requires management skills and managing people. It doesn't matter what the business is. And that's 2/3 of managing a company. Luckily, when I say managing people, we're a small company, and we don't think about things in any kind of a real organizational structure beyond, you report to you, but everybody works together. That's how all small companies work. But I would say it's less so-called organizational management and more team leadership and leadership. It's providing direction and being able to communicate what the big idea is and reminding people about that and allowing them to learn what's important and what is less important. Prioritization and just helping people, facilitating.
Sure.
And that you learn in running any business. So those are the similarities. The things that I had to learn, opening up a tasting room, oh boy. Dealing with all the state agencies, the liquor business is heavily regulated. Dealing with the federal agencies, dealing with cities and getting permits. Permits.
Yeah.
Dealing with all of the funny things that happen when you start developing a site. Suddenly the plumbing doesn't work.
Yeah.
Suddenly the health inspector doesn't like the size of your hot water heater. The first day you walk in, you overload all the electricals in the kitchen. All of these things that you can figure them out. But tenacity is the most important thing.
Sure.
I got a problem, I got to solve it.
Absolutely.
Boy, oh boy, that you just, as a small business person, you don't walk away when there's a problem. You jump in and you solve it. That's probably the most important skill you can learn. Or you better have it when you walk into a business. You have to learn how to solve problems. Sometimes it means you do the work yourself. A lot of times it means you've got to find the right person.
Sure.
And again, during the last few years, oh my God, getting tradespeople's attention, oof, tough.
You became your own general contractor, I assume.
Oh yeah. And I was very helpful a lot of times, especially with the plumbers and the electrician trying to get things done because they were so short-handed.
Sure.
So that's the part, the learning process. I will never learn enough about winemaking to call myself anything but a cellar hand. There's just no way. It takes so long, and there's so much technical information. I bought a bunch of books when I realized I was going to move out here, and on wine chemistry, for example, because I have a good enough technical background to understand all that stuff. But I realized that I was just skimming the surface, and I was kidding myself if I ever thought I'd know 1/10 of what this guy knows. So the other part of management is knowing. I think it was Clint Eastwood that said, "Man's got to know his limitations," and you just have only so much time, and you've got to focus. Like you tell everybody that you're managing, don't do this, don't do this. I had to just say to myself, I don't have the time to become a winemaker, so forget about it. Do what needs to be done. So that's the other thing. You can't do it all. Vineyard management. Oh my gosh, that's another total lifetime endeavor. So I've got an expert on winemaking. We've got experts on the vineyard management, and I stick to the business side and the management.
Well, and that's kind of just the entrepreneurial mindset in a nutshell, right? Is understanding that if you want to grow your business, if you were trying to go and pick all these grapes alone, that would basically take up all your time, I would assume, because this seems like a pretty massive vineyard you guys have got going on. But yeah, it's a humble approach to be able to accept those kinds of things, but I'm sure it makes you sleep better at night, not trying to soak up all that information and execute on it and just kind of focus on your most developed skills, if you will.
I know what my job is. So,
have you always had a deep-rooted passion, so to speak, for wine?
Actually, no. It was through my son, Eric. He's the one that had the passion, and he's the one that talked me into being involved behind the scenes. But he was the one that really had the passion. And it's only after obviously, over 20 years, I've learned to really enjoy wine. And I've certified myself to really understand it. But the passion for the whole thing, that only happens when you're involved on a day-to-day basis. So now I'm passionate in a different way.
Sure.
I love the product we make, and it is really fun to make a product like wine because everybody can enjoy it. And it's great to trade too, you know. You don't always have to pay somebody in currency. But anyway, my passion now is at the company level. I know we have great wine. I know we have great people. I want to make it a great company. And I think we have so many opportunities to do so much. And that gets back to me having to make a decision personally that I can't spend all my time learning how to make wine or grow grapes. I have to figure out how to make the company more successful because I think it should be, because I want people to be able to enjoy our wine. And so that's my job, is to get it out there to everybody so they can say, this is great, because I know it's great.
Well, and when you've got a product that you're confident in and a team that you're confident in, that makes that job a lot more easy, and you can be more passionate about it, because when you're selling this wine to people or to businesses and creating relationships, I would assume it's as simple as just kind of putting the bottle on the table. And I don't mean to make it sound simple, but you put the bottle on the table and you taste it. It's like you want the wine or you don't, right? It's a great product. So,
That's
I
true.
mean, I feel like, that is almost the sell right there.
Yes, absolutely. Once you get the wine in front of people and they taste it, the problem is getting the wine in front of the people. So that's the challenge. And we're a lot more involved in social media now, because we understand that's the best way to introduce people to the brand.
Sure.
And then the second way is to actually get the product out where people can enjoy it. So we have a relationship with Southern Glazer Wine and Spirits. They're our distributor. They help us in selling it into grocery stores, liquor stores, things like that, and restaurants. That's one way. The other is we're sitting in the tasting rooms. The tasting rooms are a great way to introduce people to our wines. And then once they really enjoy it, the third is they become club members. And club membership is a really important part of most medium-sized to small wineries. I was on the Central Coast of California last week. I finally was able to take a couple of days off and spent a lot of time just talking to people there in the same business. And most of them are actually smaller by about a factor of 3 than us.
Wow.
Like 6,000 cases or so. And a lot of wineries are smaller. People should understand that you have the monster mega guys that do 1 million cases a year like Gallo. But 90% of wineries are small businesses. And
I would classify every winery in Arizona as small.
yeah,
Definitely.
Absolutely. We're a little bigger than small, but we're small. And the point being that most of them make their businesses profitable through club membership. One of the guys I was talking to, I was really impressed with their wine. 10 guys, they produce about 6,000 cases a year, and 95% of their wine sales go to their club members.
Really?
So getting back to how do you do this business, you can do it wholesale through a distributor. You can do it through your tasting rooms. But the third leg for the small guys is to get members who really believe in your product, and they're there every year. And that's the third thing. And
it's the brand
that's fun.
loyalty, and then you're getting retail for it instead of a wholesaler who takes obviously a very, very big
All right,
chunk out of it.
You're a businessman. You understand that.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting too, because you don't really see that with beer at all. And I don't mean to keep bringing up beer, but those to me are kind of a very interesting analogy to make, because it's both very blue collar type things. There's both the retail and the wholesale side of it. And it's interesting to see how beer versus wine has manifested, because like you're saying, with a lot of businesses in the wine industry, it's integral to the success of their business. Whereas with beer, it's not so much. A can of beer is whatever, 1/4 the cost of a bottle of wine maybe.
Well, another difference is that, although this is not as true as it used to be, craft breweries make a lot of different special products. Winemakers, to keep their club membership happy, they're always having to create new product. So Jason makes, how many wines different wines you make a year?
Close to 50. Well, I mean, if you, we're also a custom crush facility, so we actually make wine for other people as well. So you include those, well over 50. So 75,
why do we do that?
Something like that.
Besides, he likes to mess around.
Sure.
One of the reasons is, getting back to the club membership, is you've got to keep them interested. The most important way is to offer them, and it's usually through special small batch products, different stuff. And if you just gave them the same mainline wines all the time, they could probably go to the grocery store and buy your stuff.
Sure.
So it's very dynamic what Jason does. He's always coming up with new product. And of course, it also depends on the sourcing, the grapes themselves. But he's always creating really interesting things. And half of it is because our membership want it. So
all right, I'm sold. Sign me up for a membership. I need to go home with a box today. But it's interesting as well because you mentioned like 15 different wines, I think you said, under your guys' brands, and then you do white labeling, if you could call that, for other brands. And that's really interesting because,
I think he said 50.
50? Okay, 50,
Yeah,
excuse me.
correct.
And so when you have a crop that is essentially grown once a year, right? You only get one fruit per year. You said the buds only come out once a year. It's pretty wild to imagine creating 50 different products from a risky endeavor in the sense that, as we were talking about earlier, you could lose it based on things that are completely out of your control unless you're out there burning fires and running frost fans and all that stuff, which may or may not even work. So talk a little bit about what it's like managing that many different products with such a unique crop.
So it's, that's something I've kind of wanted to make sure we touched on. First off, you bring up beer versus wine a bit, and the time scale.
By the way, Jason never gave his background.
Oh, we're going to circle back.
I'll get to that.
Yeah.
Yeah, but the time scale that we're working with is vastly different. So usually it's about a minimum of a year before you harvest it and it becomes a product. Putting the vines in the ground, you can put them in the ground, but you're going to have to wait 3 or 4 years before you get a decent.
And just to touch on that, like from when you pull the fruit off the plant and process it and all that, it's a year until that hits shelves essentially.
Correct. I mean, it varies a bit, white wine, red wine, whatever. But on average, that's a safe kind of middle point. It's about a year. And but anyway, so a lot of it is working with different. Just different base ingredients, and that being the different grape varieties. So Arizona is, it has an advantage and disadvantage in being, a relatively new grape growing region. And so the disadvantage is, we don't have hundreds of years of, if you're not counting like the Spanish missionaries that came through or whatever, but we don't have hundreds of years of refining which vines work best at which location, which grape varieties work best. We don't have that, so we're having to discover that all on our own. And you can make educated guesses, of course, based on similarities that we have to other growing regions and, growing degree days, maximum temperatures, moisture, things like that. So you can make educated guesses, but you still, nothing works like actually putting the vines in the ground and seeing how well it does. So the advantage of that is that Arizona has a lot of different varieties that we're growing. We're growing everything from, Pinot Noir and Pinot Gris and Chardonnay to really obscure, for a lot of people, Italian varieties and what have you. So, we have a lot of variety there is kind of the long answer to that. So that kind of base ingredient, we have a lot of different colors to choose from, if you will. And then after that, then it becomes kind of a winemaking thing, is where you, after you've exhausted all of the variety that you can get in the vineyard, although you can do a lot of different things just even with picking decisions, of course, as the grapes ripen, they have their chemistry changes, substantially. So everything from the acid in the grapes, the sugar, the composition of the skins and what have you, those things all change. So even with the different varieties, you can fluctuate things just based on picking time. And then after that, you go into different winemaking techniques, and there's stuff like carbonic maceration, which we've done a couple wines using pure carbonic maceration at the beginning, and then we finish the fermentation. That yields a wildly different product than what you'd call just a traditional fermentation. So how do you manage all these different products? Detailed notes.
Yeah, right. Well, you mentioned just the variables based on the ripening and when you're pulling the grape, let alone mixing that with other grapes, and then you create the exponential layers of options of, you have these two grapes, let's say you pull them on A date, and then you do another batch where you pulled those two grapes and mixed them on B date, and having to analyze those with other mixtures, it seems like a never-ending Excel sheet of different variables and notes that I don't know I could possibly wrap my head around.
Yeah, no, there's thousands of different iterations of things that you can do, just even working with one vineyard. So, and that's where it like Terry was saying, that's, it's not only for the customers, and of course that's, in the end, I'm not making wine for myself. We're a business,
Sure.
I'm making wine for other people to enjoy, but the variety does keep me entertained as well, so.
The way I think about it more simply is that I look at the end product that's made, and you can kind of categorize it starting with the grape varieties. So there's a Cabernet Sauvignon, there's a Chardonnay, there's a Pinot Gris. So that's one way of thinking about it. You can make, if you have 12 different varieties of grape, you can make simply 12 different varieties of wine.
Sure.
The question about picking time, Jason has made different wines from the same grape, from the same vineyard, but picked at different points in the harvest. And he's kept them separate, and he's created pick 1 through, let's say, pick 3 Cabernet Sauvignon, separate bottles. And they taste very different.
Yeah.
So that's another way of doing it. Another way, obviously, is blending.
Yes.
So we have a lot of single varieties, but we also have a lot of blends. And blending is just not a question of doing it because you want to create a certain taste. But for a lot of what we call main lines, you're selling the same product year in and year out, but things change in a vineyard. So how do you create something that is similar in taste year in and year out? You blend it. And if the grapes change year to year, your composition or mixture changes from year to year with the objective of trying to come up with something that tastes consistently year in and year out. So there's single varieties, there's time that you're picking, there's blending, and then all of this other magic that Jason does with more sophisticated wine techniques like carbonic maceration.
Sure.
So you can come up with a lot of combinations.
Yeah, and I think it's an interesting point about the consistency as well, kind of the other side of the coin. I think if you talk to any professional brewer, whether or not they love Budweiser, I think everybody has to respect the consistency of that product that they're able to create, and just the amount of just the amount of work that goes into making something consistent like that. And the beauty of wine is that it is going to be a little bit different from year to year. It's you're kind of capturing a year's worth of work.
I feel like people kind of understand that more.
They understand that
too.
But at the same time, there is you do want to have a wine. So Terry talks about our main lines. That's kind of like, we have these special small projects that we sell to, either directly from our tasting room or to our wine club members. But then we also have the wines that we distribute through Southern Glazers. And those wines, like you said, there is a tolerance in the market for some variation year to year, but you don't want it to be wildly different. You don't want the bottle of one of the wines that we make is Mangus, for example. You don't want a bottle of Mangus one year to, taste like a completely different wine the next year. So the other side of the coin, getting the consistency down when there are so many variables is another thing that's just as, in a way, just as interesting. So.
Well, my favorite bottle of wine I've ever had, I forget what year it is, but Jordan Cabernet. And I'm not super well versed and haven't tried a bunch of different national brands. I probably drink in more Arizona wine than national or global wines. And your guys' Cabernet was the closest I could get to that experience, and very close, honestly, like very, very close, to the point where not only is it way more affordable, but I just stopped really even buying Jordan because I could go to that and pick it up and be more than satisfied with it. And I would bring it over to like my fiance's dad's house, and I'm like, oh, you guys love Jordan, you got to try this. And people would jump onto it. And so with that said, I haven't had it in a while. If I get a new bottle and it doesn't taste good, I know who to go to and let know, right? But no, I think that is something that's really interesting as well is, I don't know about the full range of all your guys' different bottles. I've actually just had what I can pick up at Total Wine, and now that this spot is open here, I'm actually surprised I haven't popped in and got some more bottles. I'll definitely leave home with some. But yeah, that wine was fantastic, and that was actually what led me to start really delving more and more into Arizona wine. So thank you for making a fantastic bottle on that side of things.
You're welcome.
So I guess with all that said, tell us a little bit about your involvement into wine and how you got started.
Funnily enough, so my whole journey the very, very beginning of it was just having a really nice bottle. My dad had gotten it from, I can't remember, a friend or maybe a client of his or something like that. And it was an Australian wine, and it was aged. And those are the only two things that I actually really remember about it. I knew nothing about wine at the time. And so I had that with a friend of mine, and I was like, wow, this is really good. And I just, I was kind of looking for a career at that point, and I just heard, about, this was like 2007, 8, heard about some rumblings about wine being produced in Arizona as well. And I was got a job at a little wine barn bistro, and was speaking with one of the distributors there, and she distributed for Page Spring Cellars, and she had heard that this place called Arizona Stronghold Vineyards was looking for an intern in 2008, and so I applied for that job and got it. Did an internship at Stronghold, my first wine production job, and really loved it. And so from there, just kind of, it's fairly common for the wine industry. It's a global industry, but it's global, but it's small. You run into people, all the time. And part of the reason for that is it's really common for people when they're starting out their careers to kind of hop around different wineries because, for an internship during the harvest time, the wineries' employment needs maybe quadruple, so it's a lot easier to find a job during that time period. And of course, you might be spending all day just cleaning things, and that's fine. You're still kind of learning throughout the whole process. So yeah, I bounced around for a while. I went to New Zealand, did a harvest there,
Really?
Came back to the United States, worked in Oregon, went over to Australia and did a harvest there, came back to the United States, actually worked at Arizona Stronghold again in 2010, but the harvest was really weird. I was only getting about 20 hours a week. And so the winemaker at the time, he was like, look, you can't survive on this. Oregon is still hiring for people. Why don't you try and find a job there? And I was lucky enough to find a job at this place called Domaine Serene. Somebody had just dropped out last minute. And so I was able to get a job there, and then stayed there for about 5.5 years. Great group of people worked with up there. We were making really good wines. I'd started going to night school and stuff like that, and kind of did some math and figured that I could actually go study in New Zealand and spend either the same amount or a little bit less money on the degree that I was looking to pursue, because I was putting myself through school. And so I'd saved up some money, just kind of used my 401k basically, and said, okay, I'm just going to send myself, they had a graduate program that I could take.
And this is a winemaking degree?
Winemaking degree.
Okay.
Winemaking degree, correct. And so, yeah, I went to study in New Zealand, did that for, it was a year-long graduate program, and stayed over there for a while, for a few years and worked at a couple wineries over there again. And then kind of made my way back to the United States with my at the time fiance. We're married now, and worked in Missouri for a little bit, and then kind of as I was working in Missouri, I was there for about 2 years, and then was kind of still in contact with some people at Arizona Stronghold, And one of the contacts was that I had became the general manager at the time, and was kind of talking to him, and he was like, "Hey, you interested in a winemaking position out here in Arizona?" I said, "Well, maybe. I'm from Phoenix. My family's out here." I was like, "Yeah, I never even bothered because I didn't think it would be a possibility. There's so few places that aren't, Stronghold's unique in that there are very few places in Arizona that aren't, the winemaker is the owner. That's how small they are or something like that, and, or they, bring somebody on to help part-time or something like that. But yeah, so said yeah, and then accepted a job back at Stronghold and kind of came around full circle.
And what year was that?
So that was, my wife and I had the good fortune of moving back to Arizona for me late January of 2020. So perfect timing.
Okay.
Yeah, it was great. Get to meet all kinds of people right in the middle of the pandemic and not not leave the house.
Well, I figure that background kind of gives you a very, very good perspective. I feel like, I don't know many people working in the wine industry, many winemakers, but I feel like a lot of them maybe haven't traveled around the world as much as you have at different wineries. Is that something that you've noticed, or is it the opposite?
Well, it all depends. I mean, I would say, like I said, the wine industry is global, but it's really small. So, it's maybe not as common in Arizona, because a lot of it will be people that have, put themselves, for example, there's a great little vineyard kind of close to where I live, Mogollon Vineyards, and a gentleman there, his name is Keith. He put himself through the program that they have at the Yavapai Community College. Great program. So there are people who are, more locally educated and stuff, but there are, Rune Wines, James Callahan down there. He's worked all kinds of places as well. Cove Mesa just brought on a new winemaker, and I spoke with him. We have mutual friends in Missouri and New Zealand somehow, you know what I mean? So I've probably traveled more than the majority of winemakers here, but it's not exclusive to me. It's something that, I mean, how great is it to be able to, when you're beginning a new career, to also be able to travel the world a little bit and go to all these different places and get paid to do it. That's also,
not only the fun personal side of it, but on a professional side, I can't imagine there's a way of getting more of a better understanding of terroir, because it's not like you're just, tasting the different wines and going, oh, okay, cool, this one tastes like that or has this component to it. But you're actually seeing the way that these wineries, at least in some scale, are kind of manifesting the flavor from the grapes and from that terroir into bottles. And, I think in any industry that you're working in, if it's something you want to develop in, surround yourself with a variety of different people that are doing things in different ways, and you'll get different workflows and different technical knowledge. And it seems like that's something that you really developed over your travels.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, you learn what you, what you think is a good method, and you also learn what you don't think is a good method as well, So yeah, I of course, being exposed to all these different winemakers, winemaking techniques, and even just your coworkers, the other interns. Sometimes they're actually quite advanced winemakers in their own right back at their home. So yeah, no, it was a really valuable experience to be able to bring to winemaking, and I think to Arizona Stronghold as well. I think it allows me to create the variety of wines that we have here on our shelves. So
I have one more question before we get into kind of some of your guys' products and the tasting room and what people can expect to come in here. We'll talk a little bit more about the wine subscription. But when we did a podcast, I want to say maybe it was a year ago with Carlson Creek, Robert was saying that he thinks the grape of Arizona is Malbec for a variety of different reasons. I'm wondering what your pick of the grape of Arizona, something that is kind of unique to the region or at least manifests in a unique way, might be.
I don't know, Terry, do you want to take a crack at that one first?
Well, first of all, I wouldn't answer that question. As a politician, I'd answer the question that I wished you had asked. But no, I don't have an answer to that. But I get back to what Jason was saying earlier, let's contrast what's happened in Arizona to an established wine area, France.
Mm-hmm.
If you go to France, the first thing you'll notice is Bordeaux has a set of, let's say, 5 or 6 or 7, if you include white, grape varieties, and that's what they grow. You go to Burgundy, and same thing, totally different set of grapes. You go to the Southern Rhone, more or less, totally different set of grape varieties.
Mm-hmm.
Why is that? Well, the reason is they've spent the last 500 years by trial and error figuring out what works best in their terroir. It's taken them a long time. Now, fast forward to us. Forgetting about mission grapes and the missionaries, there's a couple of guys that have been around for, let's say, 40 years, but really it's all been happening in the last 20 years.
Mm-hmm.
We're just starting to experiment. We can tell you what grows well and what winemakers and grape farmers seem to grow a lot of, and that would be Syrah, for sure. That would be Grenache. Malbec is starting to really come on. It seems to be a new fan favorite. That's how I describe it. And then you've got the Bordeaux blends. We grow a lot of Cabernet Sauvignon, Merlot, and the other Bordeauxs. And I'm sure Jason can mention a lot others. The point is that there's still a lot of experimentation going on. And since these are businesses, the first thing you try to grow are grapes that you know people will buy as a wine. So you think about the big guys. Syrah and Grenache are the main reds in the Southern Rhone, which happens to be similar in climate and terroir as to here. So it's a pretty good guess as your first approximation. The Bordeauxs, again, people love cabs. We're next to California. If people drink cabs because it's what's grown in California, why don't you start with that? So I think a lot of the ones that we would say grow well here are probably because we've seen it grow elsewhere in climates that are similar, and we think they could be sold. Now, again, so my answer to Malbec is we'll see. It seems to be growing well. It seems to be producing good wine. But we probably need another 20 years to figure that out.
Sure.
Why don't you pick up where I stopped?
Yeah, I mean, I'm kind of, I would basically give the same answer. I mean, I think Malbec does very well here. And a question like that, I think, to regions like, tough to call it a region because it's so large, but you think about Australia and Shiraz, for example, and I think about the pitfalls that may be associated with, associating your entire growing region with one grape as well, to be honest. But I just think it's too, respectfully to the Carlsons, I think it's too early to really say.
Well, and I might have phrased that differently than he said it. So if you're listening, Carlsons, I'm sorry if I did such a thing. And I love how
I didn't say that.
No, I love also how you proclaimed to be a politician and you did a 10 out of 10 question dodge, and it was still perfectly articulated with a point at the end. So very nice work on that. But yeah, I think that's, we talked a little bit about the experimentation side of things. It seems like Arizona is kind of positioned to become one of very well recognized as a unique growing region for the many different components that you guys have talked about. And also there's kind of the shock factor of people not realizing where grapes grow in Arizona and how grapes grow in Arizona. Because the amount of people that still come here, friends and family, that are like, oh, I thought it was just a big desert. And you go 2 hours up to Flagstaff and you feel like you're in a different part of the country. It's pretty incredible. And grapes don't necessarily grow there. And as I said before we started the podcast, I've not been to Wilcox, but I would imagine that Wilcox looks different from Sonoyta, looks different from the Cottonwood, Verde Valley area.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yep.
Yeah, and even the varieties that grow best in each region are, can be a bit different. I mean, I think there's definitely some overlap. But I don't know.
But just to emphasize that point, Bonita Springs is 20 miles north of Wilcox, northeast.
Yeah, something like that. I'd have
So,
to, yeah.
and it's near Mount Graham, and so you have those aspects that Jason was talking about. But 20 miles away, the main varieties are the ones I mentioned, Syrah and Grenache. We have mostly Bordeaux blends. We have Cabernet Sauvignon, Cabernet Franc, Merlot. We do have some Malbec. So 20 miles, that's all.
Yeah.
And that's all it takes to make a difference in what grows well.
Mm-hmm.
So,
well, it's interesting, too, in a state that for so many years grew corn and things like that and supplied the entire country. You look at Yuma growing all the lettuce that they do, supplying so much of the country with that. It's very exciting to see people adopting regenerative agriculture and growing different types of crops and things like that really show the diversity of what probably 99% of the country outside of Arizona just considers a desert. It's definitely so much more than that. And I think that plays a very interesting part in the storyline of Arizona wines in general.
Yeah, one other comment on that is, since I'm a newbie here in a sense, even though I've been coming here for 20 years, when I talk to people about Arizona, those that haven't been here think it's flat and desert. It's Tucson and Phoenix. And they don't even realize in Phoenix and Tucson that there's mountains.
Yeah.
And then I remember one person telling me that, I'm sure this is an exaggeration, that if you didn't have buildings in Arizona, any place you stood, you'd see a mountain. That may be true. But people are flabbergasted when they hear that there is a 12,000-foot peak in Arizona. And that there are, I'm guessing, 20 different mountain ranges with at least 8,000-foot mountains. They're flabbergasted. They don't understand that there are areas of farming that start at 4,000 feet and go up to 5,000 feet elevation. And that in itself allows for farming. They don't understand where the water comes from, which is, the big issue going forward. But they don't understand anything about Arizona. They just think about the cactuses and flat desert with lizards.
They just imagine like a saguaro and a sun, and that's about it. Maybe a coyote or a rattlesnake or something. Well, and one more note on the geological factor. Like one of the very interesting ways that I didn't realize this until probably a year or two ago, but that the Mogollon Rim stretches way over from the Pine area all the way up into Flag, and then once you get over that, it's a very different environment than it is down here. I believe it's still a desert, at least in some parts, based on rainfall and whatnot. But yeah, I remember the first time I climbed the Mogollon Rim, and I'm just like, man, it's quite a wonderful state that we live in. You can travel just a couple of hours and get almost what feels like exact opposite environments to be in. And so with that, segueing into your guys' products, I'd like to hear, maybe a few of them, or one if something pops to mind, some of your guys' favorite wines, and how people can come in here and enjoy those wines.
You're the wine guy.
Okay, all right, I'll start. So, I mean, we've talked about the kind of, our distributed wines, mainline wines, and those are all fantastic. For example, Mangus is one of my favorites. I love Tazi as well. Mangus is kind of our answer to like a super Tuscan blend. So it's got Cab Merlot and Sangiovese. So it's this beautiful wine, really food friendly, nice bright acidity to it, nice red fruit flavors. Tazi is an aromatic, dry aromatic white wine blend using Malvasia Bianca, which, going kind of back to that conversation about, what's the state grape of Arizona. If I were to actually choose one, Malvasia just for, how prolific it is here. And
it's a white grape.
It's a obviously. White grape. Yeah, white grape. And it just does really well. And it's one of those ones that, ignoring the Cab and Syrah and all that type of stuff that we grow, it was a white grape that isn't really widely planted in the United States, but really just took off in Arizona immediately. But anyways, so that the Tazi blend is kind of based on that. All the main lines are fantastic. You can find them in Total Wine, grocery stores, liquor stores, what have you. But so the stuff that we have that makes our wine club and the tasting room experience unique. Like right now I'm kind of looking over there. I did a white Cabernet Franc. So Cabernet Franc is a red grape. I did a Blanc de Noir from it, a still Blanc de Noir. So it's it's not a new winemaking technique at all. It's what they do to make like champagne, sparkling wines. But this is picked a little bit riper than that and made into a still wine. So that's a wine that I really love right now, especially in the hot weather. You can come and try it. It's so we took Cabernet Franc grapes, which are red, and took those, pressed them very, very gently in our press. Got a small fraction of it, about less than 50% of the juice didn't have any color to it. We took that, kept that separate. The rest of it we pressed and made into a rosé, really lovely rosé that goes into some of our other wines. And this first fraction of white juice we fermented separately in temperature-controlled stainless steel. The whole idea behind it was super light, crisp, nice and fruity, something that you can have with either really light seafood or just like enjoy on the porch in Arizona. Really love that right now. Kind of a unique wine, I think, as well for Arizona. Not a lot of those being produced here, as far as I know. There's, I'm not a huge sweet wine drinker, but I'm really proud, really happy with the Muscat that we made from actually Carlson Creek's fruit. So we made a Muscat kind of in the Moscato d'Asti style, so a little bit lower alcohol, a bit of residual sugar to it, but still really balanced, nice acidity and everything. Slightly effervescent as well, so also another really refreshing one. And then...
effervescent meaning a little bubbly.
Yeah, just a touch.
Is that
bubbly.
a natural thing, or is that something that you guys did?
Well,
after?
That's something that we kind of. It can be a natural thing, if you have the exact right equipment and you process it correctly, because during fermentation there is carbon dioxide produced, and there's just a lot of ways to do it, but. Do
bottles explode the way that beer cans explode when they get secondary fermentation?
They can, yes.
Yeah.
Typically, most of these bottles are going to be constructed in such a way that they're durable enough to...
Yeah, think about a champagne bottle with the cage and how thick that is. Mm-hmm. That's because there's secondary fermentation.
Those are really
champagne technique.
Those can handle up to like 12 bar, something insane like that. Yeah, they can handle really high pressures. This slight effervescence that I'm talking about is you pour it and it's just slightly fizzy. There's no way these bottles are going to blow up. This we added the CO2 to it, but the method we used
the same way that a typical beer would be carbonated.
Roughly. Yeah. I mean, we don't have pressure tanks, so we don't have bright tanks.
Okay.
Or a spumante. A lot of the sparkling product out there are actually done the way we're talking about, more or less. You add the CO2 afterwards.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Okay.
Yeah, I had to improvise a little bit, and basically instead of using a proper bright tank and pressurizing it, I just got the wine very, very cold. Gases are more soluble at lower temperatures, so I was able to get the wine very cold, bottle it cold.
So you have to know chemistry to be a
winemaker.
Yeah. You have to know that CO2 will dissolve at a lower temperature, and then you can capture it, put it in the bottle, and then when it warms up to normal, you've got fizz.
Yeah.
Because it turns into a gas.
Well, and I remember that gases are more soluble at a lower temperature, but to scale that up to a level where you can make a bunch of bottles and have it execute on a high level, that's not something, as with you, that's not something I would ever even try and attempt. So, but continue on with a few more of the ones that you've got.
Yeah, so I mean, we've got this kind of cool program that we have. So given that we're one of the larger wineries, even though, again, I just want to reiterate, every winery in Arizona is small. Mm-hmm. This is the smallest winery I've ever worked for. In my career, still is. But and that's something to be proud of. You're always supporting a small, family-owned business when you're buying Arizona wine. But
which is interesting to wrap your head around when you see this picture here of all these grapes, and imagine how many millions of grapes must be in there, or whatever the number is. It's kind of hard to wrap your head around until you see pictures of ones that take like entire mountains up, it seems
Yeah.
like.
Jason, what did we produce last year in terms of cases?
Everything
Custom, our product, everything.
we're in that like 15,000 case range. It's and that's a ballpark because it's so dependent upon yields. Every year it's different.
And how many bottles are in a case?
12.
12?
Yep.
So well over 100,000 bottles.
Correct. Yep.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah.
It's crazy that that's small.
Yeah. No, so I worked at one place, and you've seen the wine most certainly. I worked for Oyster Bay. It's actually owned by a company named Delegates in New Zealand. I'll get back to our wines real quick, but just to give an idea of the scale. So in order to produce what we roughly that number of cases, we processed about 250-ish tons worth of grapes.
Wow.
That's what we do.
Yeah.
That's what we do. At Delegates at Oyster Bay, in a day, they would process between 18 and 20,000 tons.
Wow.
So
In a day.
In a day.
Wow, that's
Anyways,
incredible.
Yeah, so that's the scale difference. But
Sure takes a lot of grapes to make a lot of wine,
it
doesn't
does.
it?
Yeah. But anyways, we've got so given that we're a little bit bigger, we're able to kind of squirrel away wines that we think would be interesting to release a little bit later sometimes. So, we'll release these wines to our wine club members and then kind of take what's left over, hold on to it, cellar it, and then release it with a bit of age on it. So we've got these 2017 Syrahs. There are a few different ones that we've held on to. It's got a little bit more age than usual, and I think that's always really interesting for people to be able to kind of to come and taste a properly cellared, because humidity, temperature, those are very, very important things for storage of wine. You can't just throw it in your garage and leave it there for 4 years and expect everything to be okay. I once went to my granddad's house in Las Vegas. And looked under his cupboard, and he had a bottle of Dom Perignon that had been sitting there since the 80s.
Wow.
It's like he asked me if it was still good. I was like, no, Granddad, it's not good. But anyways, so I think those Syrahs are really cool for people to be able to try. So, off the top of my head, what we're pouring right now, I think those are kind of some unique, tasty, and just fun wines that people can come and try at the tasting rooms.
Yeah, we sell those in flights, meaning
You're talking about the Syrahs.
Yeah, same year or within a year, different vineyards. And that's really cool. You have 5 or 6 year old Syrahs from basically the same area, slightly different vineyards.
Sure.
And set them up and do a comparison. It's really interesting to see how different they are with just the vineyard down that way versus the vineyard over there. It's just amazing.
Yeah,
that's fun.
Same winemaker, same winemaking techniques.
Yep.
Obviously,
Yep.
and
That is one of the best ways to develop a palate, I believe, because I've done that with, not that exact thing, obviously, with beer. I've done similar things with wine. But to be able to take things and, have someone explain, okay, this was in this area and this is here, here's how it changes it. That is, you're not going to get that type of experience by going and picking up bottles at AJ's or Safeway or Total Wine or wherever it may be. You have to come to a place like this for that to happen.
yeah, and that's what I think is, again, it's unique. It's you're just not going to be able to get that experience very easily unless you have a friend who has a big cellar or something like that.
Sure.
So, but unless you've got one of those friends, that's an experience that's difficult to come by.
I could use a few more of those friends. If you guys know of any, let me know, because I could use some. Well, is there anything
I'm still
else?
looking for them myself.
Yeah, right. Is there anything else you guys want to share? Maybe upcoming projects, upcoming releases that people should know about?
Oh gosh. We have a lot of ideas. Again, my job is to think of bounce ideas off of people like Jason and see what makes sense. The only thing I can say is that we are looking into a lot of other ways of delivering wine and other alcoholic beverages. And in the next year, I think we'll be introducing some of those.
How do you mean, if you can be more specific?
Well, we're looking into getting a craft distiller's license. And that will open up a lot of channels. What we do with it, I'm not sure, but wine cocktails, cocktails in a can, those types of things.
Based off of like a brandy, would it be
Well,
from your wines?
Maybe not. Certainly anything that is labeled as a wine something or other, we'd be using wine and maybe brandy. But we will go away from that as well, if it makes sense from a marketing perspective.
Interesting.
Yeah. But there's a lot of research that has to be done.
Sure.
And getting back to the not so fun part of the job, all the licenses required to get those things. You've got federal, you've got state. It takes a long
Yeah,
time.
well, I've heard bad things from like the wine and beer side of it, but from distillers, it's like a whole different ball game. It seems like, of just the amount of like safety measures and things, hoops that you have to jump through to make it happen.
That's his job.
Yeah.
He's got to describe everything physically.
It's been interesting. Yeah, we're kind of completing the first stages of getting that done. So that's exciting. We're just waiting on a few things now. As far as that goes, I'm not sure how long that's going to take. But other interesting things that are going on, and this is kind of a perennial thing. This isn't necessarily something new, but both for new customers and a lot of this is geared towards our wine club members, but we have a lot of events that go on throughout the year as well. We've got for me, I'm going to be kind of sucked into the world of harvest here within the next few weeks, and so I'll kind of be living in a black hole and seeing my wife a few hours maybe a week or whatever, but during the fall we've got some really great events coming up. We've got a wine club dinner that I believe is going to be taking place October, correct?
Near Halloween.
Yeah, near Halloween.
Up in Cottonwood.
With Wild Arizona Cuisine.
Brett Vibber.
Yep, correct.
Yeah. Okay.
Great guy, does really amazing work. So really excited to kind of, we've been trying to start a relationship with him for a while because he's just a great guy, and he does well. It's not just him, of course. It's his whole company there. They do an awesome job. We've got that coming up. We've also got, and this is one that's not new at all, but it happens all the time. Or I mean, not all the time, but every year, and people love it. And I would, if it weren't, during fall, I would love to do it myself. But we do what we call palate training. So we have an event where
it's a play on the word train.
Yeah, it's play on the word train. It's drinking a bunch of wine on the Verde Canyon Railroad. And yeah.
I don't know if you know about Verde Canyon. It's awesome. They take a real train and they go up Sycamore Canyon, and it's all decked out. It's air conditioned and they have bars in there and everything. And we rent 2 enclosed cabs with an open cab in the middle so that you can view, and you go up Sycamore. It's all beautiful. And the Verde River runs up there, and it's all red rock, and it's a 3 to 4 hour round trip, and it's just awesome.
Wow.
And everybody loves it. Views, wine, what else do you need?
Yeah,
food.
Absolutely.
So we do it. Getting back to the club members like new interesting product. That's why we create a lot of wines, and they love events. Who wouldn't? So we're
especially
always,
when you're bringing in someone like Brett Vibber.
Oh yeah.
Some of the most unique food you can get.
Yeah. So we're doing, and now that we're down here in the valley with this tasting room, we're going to start doing a lot more wine paired dinners in restaurants. We just did one last night.
It went really well
in Mountain Shadow at Hearth 61.
I think I saw you guys post about that. Yeah.
The chef there made unbelievable food. Oh,
yeah, it was Martin Yepes from Orange
Sky.
Yep.
Yeah, Orange Sky.
I thought that's what it was. I just want to make sure I got it correct. Yeah.
So we're going to be doing a lot more of those down here. And again, our members love that, but the public obviously is invited to all of those things. And it helps us develop that brand identity, which is so important. But one other thing that we ought to just mention is that as the industry has grown here, there's been a lot more people getting into the wine end of the business, the winemaking, and supply is not keeping up with it. It takes a long time to develop a vineyard. So there's a shortage of grapes.
Okay.
And we're responding to that by planting every year, programmatically. And so that's what we're doing for ourselves. And it's just been remarkable how much grape prices have gone up. I'm not saying they're the same as they are in California. But again, I mentioned I was out there last week and I was talking to guys in the Central Coast. And the Pinot guys, oh my God, do they pay a lot for Pinot. But grapes in Arizona are starting to move up towards the kind of the mid-range of grapes in California now. They're not there yet, but oh my gosh, they've gone up so much in the last couple of years. And therefore, we grow our own grapes, but we also source from others. And the prices have gone up a lot. Our answer, let's plant more. It's very expensive to develop vineyards.
Sure.
Very expensive. And as Jason mentioned, you don't get a crop for at least 3 to 4 years. So it's all front-loaded with respect to negative cash flow. But this is also giving us an opportunity to experiment with more grape varieties. So Jason was mentioning some of the things. What are any other ones that you can think of that you think are going to do well that we're going to start planting?
Oh, I mean, there's actually quite a few. I mean, as far as white varieties, we want to eventually plant things like Albarino. There are a ton of Italian varieties that I think would do really well. We've sourced Vermentino and Pickpool that work really well in Arizona, and I'd love to plant those. There are just Verdelho is one. Yeah, Verdelho is one that I would really love to plant. And then as far as the red varieties, there's dozens. Again, a lot of Italian varieties seem to do exceptionally well in Arizona, and there's
and then not Italian but Tempranillo.
So I mean, I think that's a really great thing to mention is. That's more of a slow burn. It's coming thing, but we do have new sections of the vineyard that are coming online for us that are going to be finally starting to produce. So we made a tiny amount of Marsanne in 2021, which is a really interesting grape variety, and that first batch has turned out really well. We're kind of pouring it right now as well for our wine club members. Only made a barrel of it. That's all I could, get out of it, which is 25 cases. And, but we're going to get a better crop of that this year. We're going to get Trebbiano, or also known as Uni Blanc this year. We're going to get our first real crop load of Malbec. So, we've got all of these really interesting developments in our own vineyard that are kind of right on the cusp of occurring, thanks to that, 3-year delay. But so I feel like that's, for the industry as a whole, Terry's talked about the fact that the vineyards haven't really kept up with the grape demand, and that's certainly true. So I think that's going to be the next big kind of, and it's always a balancing act. We're probably going to plant too many grapes here within the next, decade in Arizona, and then, that might balance out with, the number of wineries, and it'll go back and forth. But I think that'll be the next big thing that we see is hopefully. Otherwise, I don't know what we're going to make. Well, a lot of these people are going to be making wine from, but hopefully we'll see this big boom of planting and a lot more interesting varieties being tested and kind of vetted and developed. So
just kind of a parting comment. You need a critical mass in this kind of an industry to get people to notice it, and I think we're getting close to it in Arizona. There's enough money being invested in it, and the knowledge, the depth of knowledge of the winemakers and the grape growers is now getting to the point where I think this critical mass is just about here, and the recognition will follow.
Mm-hmm. Well, not that you haven't done so already, but it's exciting to see people that are so passionate about the wine and making such good product truly position themselves as people to be a part of leading Arizona into that next evolution where, we're pushing into the medium levels of California wines. With my minimal experience, I think, someday we might hit even beyond that level, because from what I've tasted from different places around the state, including you guys, it's fantastic stuff. And I think there's a lot more that we're going to have to talk about sometime in the future. So we'll set up a time for us to come and bother you about wine pairings with food or something fun like that, because you guys sure have a lot of knowledge to share with people.
All right.
No, thank
Looking forward to it.
Yeah, and next time, I guess my only complaint would be that we scheduled it so early that I don't know if I would dig into wine this time around. So next time, maybe we'll do it a little bit later and bust a bottle opener too.
All right.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Good.
Well, thank you so much, guys. It was such a pleasure sitting down with you. You have obviously plenty of things going on right now. So until next time, thanks again.
Thank you.
All right.
Cheers.
Thanks.